All right. Sorry about that delay. Madam Secretary? Hi, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us. I'm Katie Savage. I am the Do It Secretary. I'm joined today by Marcy Jacobs, Deputy Secretary and Chief Digital Experience Officer, and James Saunders, who is the Acting Chief Information Security Officer. We're really excited to brief you today. We have a bill coming before you tomorrow on revenue sharing agreements. So we wanted to take this opportunity to give you a little bit of background for those that are new and bring the rest of you that I've had the opportunity to speak with up to speed on our activities for the past couple of years or so. So I'm going to jump forward. I want to just briefly, I know we have brief time today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our priorities and our wins. Marcy will talk about the Maryland Digital Service. I'll talk briefly about infrastructure, and James will talk about our cybersecurity efforts. We did intros. I'll be super brief. For those of you who have heard from me before, this will be pretty familiar, but since coming in under the Moore-Miller administration 3 years ago, I've significantly expanded the department to bring more technical competence into the organization. We now have, you'll see, 7 verticals. So we have a chief operating officer, 2 chief technology officers, 1 for client services and platforms. So that's things like Google, Microsoft, ServiceNow, et cetera. So common software platforms that everybody utilizes, along with our service desk. A chief technology officer for the 2 networks that we run. So we run Maryland First, which is the state's radio network used primarily by first responders. We also have Network Maryland, which is the state's internet network. You'll hear from Marcy. Marcy will talk. Her office is brand new because we were just speaking about Doge. Doge's loss has been our gain. So we've been able to staff that with about 45 people, and she'll speak to the efforts of that organization. James, also relatively new and doing an incredible job building out cybersecurity for Do It, for state agencies, but importantly for the counties and municipalities that all of you serve. We've also folded the Office of the Chief Data Officer, the Senior Advisor for Responsible AI from the Governor's Office into Do It as well. And then as of July 1st, the organization formerly known as Maryland Think, MD Think, is now part of Do It as well. So briefly to touch on our top 3 priorities, there is a 65-page strategic plan that we released this August, if you would care to read more. But at a very high level, we have 3 goals of our organization that we are aiming towards as North Stars for the next 5 years. One is building out Do It and agency capacity. As I just spoke to on the last slide, it's really important that we get technical talent into the organization, but I also think it's really important that we have tech talent at the agencies themselves. You know, Marcy will speak to this, but a lot of our work isn't possible if we don't have tech-savvy consumers at the agencies. So we're actively working to bring CIOs, product leaders, engineers, et cetera, at the agencies as well. 2, user-centered service delivery. It's really important that every touch point that we have with our constituents across technology considers the end user. We want to make sure that we're building technology, not just redesigning a website or a tech platform for redesign's sake, but that we're actually giving them information that they need or services that they need. And then lastly, centralization to support agency missions. When I started at the state, there were 13 different Microsoft contracts. We are down to 1. There are a lot of platforms where that has to happen. We also want to make sure that not just like-for-like software vendors, but where we're seeing electronic health records or sort of certain types of platforms. We don't want to be building those over and over. So those are our priorities that I think will carry us through at least the next couple of years. To touch on a couple of accomplishments, I spoke about the department-wide modernization that we've done. James, again, has really just done an incredible job. When I started, I like to say there were a handful of people and a lot of CrowdStrike. We now have 22 full-time people. One of the accomplishments that we did this year, we launched the first bug bounty program, which is an opportunity for people to report vulnerabilities to us before an adversary might find them. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing, and again, James will get into that. As I mentioned, MD Think transitioned to Do It in July. Some of the success we've seen already, we launched one application, which is consolidating 5 public benefits applications into a single online application. So, Senator Bailey was just talking about the lack of internet access across the state. It's now a mobile application. We still have in-person offices. And I want to note that almost 250,000 people, 250,000 Marylanders have used it to apply for benefits thus far. Other things, we established the Maryland Digital Service, which went from just really Marcy and I to 45 people to oversee major IT technology projects. So we'll get into that. AI readiness, we have a responsible AI use policy for the state. And importantly, we're also using AI to address things like high call volumes, for example, or permitting processes, or examples of where AI can really be a benefit to our work in government. Broadband and infrastructure, we have the bill again tomorrow, so I won't belabor this. But we are one of the few states that have our own internet network, which is an incredible asset. And we want to use that and expand it to make sure that we're making sure that all Marylanders have digital access. So tomorrow we will be speaking, just a quick preview, we will be talking about expanding our authority over revenue sharing agreements, which are agreements that the state has in place with public or private utilities if they are utilizing state assets like roads, right-of-ways, bridges, et cetera. We charge them rent, and then we can put that back into our infrastructure. So we want to talk a little bit more tomorrow about how that program works, and some enhanced authorities we'd like to be able to administer that funding a little bit more effectively. So with that, unless you want me to pause for any questions by way of intro, I will turn it over to the real stars, Marcy and James.
Thank you, Secretary. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you. This one? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Jacobs. As Secretary Savage mentioned, I lead the Maryland Digital Service, which is a new-ish organization. We've been around for 2 years. The governor created the Maryland Digital Service really to make it easier for Marylanders to interact with government, but also for state staff to be able to interact with constituents. So our focus is how do we support people finding information, accessing information, applying for services, managing and using their services. And that touches everything from websites, which we have hundreds of websites, to our transactional experiences, like applying for benefits, applying for permits or licenses, or paying your taxes. So really, we get involved in a number of different efforts across that spectrum. Okay. So in the past year, we have grown from 22 staff to 49 staff. And really that is in response to the demand that we're getting from agencies. We have agencies coming to us saying, we want help with our website, we need help with our content, we need help with accessibility. Our system is not performing as well as we know that it could. In addition to a program that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, which is an intervention program where we see projects that are struggling and we provide support to help them course correct. That expansion in staff has really been around a few critical modern software development skill sets that we have not previously seen across the state. User experience design, which is really understanding how people interact with technology and what they're trying to accomplish, product management, and engineering. And that is both within the Maryland Digital Service in Do It, but then also deployed out to agencies to support their efforts. Another way that we have scaled is we were recently awarded a very large contract vehicle, which gives us access to 8 local digital service firms, which gives us agencies' ability to use these firms to support their needs. On the right-hand side of this slide is more focused on delivery. We've used the past kind of our first 2 years as building a foundation, and now we're really pivoting into delivering. We have built the new content management system in Drupal for all state websites. This is in response to our current technology being end of life, cyber attacks that happened over the summer, and recognizing that we needed a platform that better served constituents. The Maryland.gov site launched the end of last year. We have about 15 more sites launching this quarter. We are working our way through a very large backlog of sites that are, in addition to not being on the right technology platform, not performing as well as they could. We've implemented an analytics program. If you go to analytics.maryland.gov, you can see the volume of traffic to these different sites, where people are going, what they're using. We are adding additional functionality to our analytics platform, and including things like customer satisfaction and effectiveness of content so that we can continue to refine. We also completed an AI pilot with the Department of the Environment, looking at the site selection process, which for developers who want to build within the state is a very burdensome process where they have to submit a PIA request, an information access request. It's burdensome on staff and it's burdensome on developers, and we were able to build a pilot that saves a huge amount of time and reduces burden both for our constituents and staff. Okay, so a little bit more about the MITDP program. My team is responsible for oversight of this large portfolio of projects. There are roughly 60 projects right now. These are development projects in the state that are over $5 million. And they are at various points in their life cycle, but many of these projects go on for years and years. And in many cases, these projects don't deliver the intended value or the intended outcome. So we are reforming what oversight means and making a lot of changes to that program so that we can improve the delivery of real value to Marylanders and be better stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we have in this fund. The issues that we are seeing on these projects is that many of them are really taking the lens of implement technology as their approach. And I think what we heard, and I'll just talk a little bit about what we heard from the comptroller, technology by itself is just technology. And if we aren't thinking about the entire constituent journey, all of the touch points, the letters that they get, the phone calls that they have to make, the in-person visits, we are sometimes only fixing one part of the problem. So we are driving a shift from technology and project delivery to thinking about truly service delivery. What are all the things that need to come together for our constituents to be successful? That shift is going to take a lot of change within agencies. And one of the kind of big shifts with our approach is requiring this modern software development staff on all MITDP projects. Having someone who thinks about user-centered design, having a true product lead, which is different from a project manager, having a engineering or technology lead on the project and steering so that we are less dependent on our vendors to chart the course and then drive the car. Those interventions, and I'm going to talk about one in a second, look like things from a discovery project where we might get involved for maybe 2 or 3 months to help figure out, is this project on the right path? Do we need to make any adjustments? Are we comfortable with how this is moving forward? We've done a number of those projects and we have a number teed up. And then the deployed teams model where agencies say, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know how to hire a user experience designer. I don't really know what that looks like. Or a product manager or an engineer. We are hiring those people and then deploying them to these projects to help lead and make sure that the project is pointed in the right direction. I don't know if any of you were in the review sessions. We're also launching an MITDP dashboard later this month, which will give more transparency and visibility into the projects in the portfolio. I'm going to jump into an example of an intervention. So there are a few projects under the big umbrella of permitting and licensing. The governor's office has asked us to work on accelerating permitting and licensing. And permitting and licensing is at least 1,300 forms across the state. It is everything from make it easier to find a job in your desired field. So Department of Labor and Department of Health both have a huge volume of occupational licensing. Those are 2 MITDPs that we are supporting, not what I'm going to talk about, but in that portfolio of things, making it easier to start, manage, or grow a business in the state. The Business Express tool is part of it, but for a business owner, they have to understand and navigate a lot of complexity and bureaucracy to be able to be successful. So we are making refinements to that process to make it more user-centered. And then lastly, which I am going to talk about, is around developing and building property in the state. And there's an example with the Department of the Environment with their portal project that I just want to highlight quickly, and I know in the interest of time, I will touch on this briefly. So this is an MITDP, the MDE portal project. They have 400 forms, some of which are digital, many of which are paper. We deployed a user experience designer and a product manager onto this team to help shift the way they were approaching this problem. And they started by doing discovery and really leaning into what is the problem that we are trying to solve. It's not just take digital forms and make them a shinier version of digital, or take paper forms and make them PDFs. What will be better if we are successful? And what they were really trying to address, what the agency is really trying to address, is the turnaround time. How long it takes for someone who submits a form to get a decision. There are a number of contributing factors that came out of this discovery effort. Everything from paper checks that are getting mailed in where the sender has no idea if it was received or what the status is, the complexity and difference of permit forms themselves, some still being paper, and then even things like the website and finding the right permit. A lot of people would go down the wrong path, fill out the wrong paperwork, submit it, wait a long time to hear back, and then have to start over. And then a lot of phone calls and churn around what is the status of my application. So the team is anchored on how do we shorten the timeline from someone submits a form, the right form, to they get a decision. So focusing on the delivery side of this, the agency was looking at all of the forms and kind of prioritizing them equally. 400 forms, we're just going to work our way through the 400 forms. When we looked across the 400 forms and we looked at the data, it was very evident that 20% of these permits contributed to 80% of the volume. So starting with that 20% was going to get the highest return. There are forms that are used maybe once a year that are not worth a huge amount of investment, and they are incredibly complex, and other forms that have a lot of kind of repeat problems that we could fix and have a much bigger impact. So the incremental approach, the focus on delivery not at the end of a multi-year project, but throughout a multi-year project is part of this reform initiative. Understanding where we are going to have the most impact, and then doing iterative development and shipping value in a recurring basis. The online payment piece of this project ships, I think, tomorrow, and the first chunk of forms is teed up to start development immediately after. These are some of the reforms that we are putting in place to start changing the narrative and really focusing much more on outcomes and what are we getting through our investment in MITDPs, as opposed to just, is this on time and on budget, but maybe missing the mark on what we really need to solve for. That's it for me.
Thanks. I'll turn over to James, who's our Acting Chief Information Security Officer.
Hey, perfect. Thank you, Secretary Savage. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk about the Office of Security Management. My name is James Saunders, as Secretary Savage just mentioned. I am the Acting Chief Information Security Officer, and we live and breathe cybersecurity and privacy. Oops, there we go. So I want to touch on what is the Office of Security Management, also known as OSM. The Office of Security Management is an organization that's in Maryland code that is designed to focus primarily on four goals. One is to establish statewide cybersecurity and privacy strategy, standards, and policies. Second is to provide centralized cybersecurity services, as well as technologies across the executive branch and other organizations that are willing to partner with us. Third is leading statewide cybersecurity incident response and preparedness. And then last is continuous reporting, for example, the state of cybersecurity preparedness report that is due at least annually. One thing I like to think about OSM is that, we enable agencies to focus on what they do best, which is deliver on the value to Marylanders, where we focus on the continuous cybersecurity threat. All right, so I'm really excited to talk about a couple key accomplishments and wins that we achieved in calendar year 25. First is, and Secretary Savage mentioned this earlier, the release and launch of the Vulnerability Disclosure Program, also known as the VDP. This program allows security researchers from around the nation and technically around the globe to let us know when there's weaknesses and vulnerabilities on our public-facing services. What's unique about our VDP compared to other states and other organizations is that it also extends down to our local government partners as well. And due to the fact that we protected the Network Maryland infrastructure with this VDP. To date, we have about 150 reports that came in, which roughly 1/3 of those are critical or high of nature, which allows us to remediate and resolve those ahead of time before a threat actor takes advantage of those. The second part of that is launching the Maryland ISAC, or the Maryland Information Sharing Analysis Center BOD. And with this new BOD, it actually extended access to our sharing capability to IT vendors that serve the state of Maryland, and second, to critical infrastructure providers as well. That is a very concerning space that we are partnering with our industry peers to figure out how do we address threats to critical infrastructure. Next is deploying new tools and technologies to defend our infrastructure. So we deployed a technology called Abnormal Security AI, and what that does is scans and protects our emails from malicious cybersecurity threats that come in. It's well known that email is one of the top vectors for cybersecurity attacks across multiple different sectors, including public sector, including the state of Maryland. So this is highly critical for us to protect ourselves, especially as threat actors are using AI themselves to generate attacks towards our state. Next is we are strengthening our infrastructure, as Marcy alluded to earlier, with the migration to Drupal, for example. But we're protecting our DNS, domain name service, which is the way that you connect to different websites, with technology called Cloudflare. Cloudflare is one of the leading providers in this space, used by multiple agencies, both federal, state, and local. And that is there to prevent malicious attacks coming against, again, our websites and public services. The next one is really big to me, which is we launched our local information security officer program, also known as ISOs. ISOs are our security liaisons down to our local government municipality partners. They are there to help support any security needs they have. They are there to help address any weaknesses. They are there to provide me with feedback on how can we better tailor our services to our local partners. And to date, we enrolled 42 jurisdictions. That's a mix of local governments as well as municipalities, and supported 27 grant applications to the state and local cybersecurity grant program, which is a federal government program that provides funds to state and local to address cybersecurity gaps and weaknesses. And to date, we completed 14 full cybersecurity assessments, and we have currently 10 that is in progress. And then next up, we have the launching of the state version of the ISO program, which we have 16 cybersecurity professionals assigned to executive branch agencies so that they can have similar experiences with us as well. We have worked with them to identify and address over 4,000 findings through the use of weakness evaluation reports as well as corrective action plans. One of the key items that we're currently working through is centralizing on cybersecurity service adoption. To me, this is probably one of the most critical elements we can do as a state right now, is to have a common visibility plane and a common defense posture. So right now we're working through that, making sure that we're all using the same technology, have the same visibility, working through the same process and procedures, so that when we have to deal with any cyber attacks, we're able to respond as a single organization versus a mix of different agencies. So moving forward, what is OSM doing in calendar year 26? So I laid out 6 primary key focus areas for the team to accomplish in partnership with state agencies as well as local government. One is to modernize our governance. What this means is that we are working on updating and replacing the current IT security manual with a modern security suite that brings together cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, as well as privacy governance into a single set, so that we're all operating off the same exact playbook and rule set. Second, under governance is launching, or relaunching actually, our cybersecurity preparedness assessments. By law, we're supposed to do these biannually every 2 years. We anticipate starting this back up, I will say late spring, early summertime. Right now, we're working through that procurement with, in partnership with OSP. Under cyber defense, technology is constantly changing, and threat actors are constantly changing, so we need to continuously improve our defenses. So as I mentioned before, the first item is that we have to centralize cybersecurity across, at minimum, the executive branch, so that we can see and respond to cyber threats in real time together. Otherwise, adversaries will take that fragmentation to their advantage and be able to achieve their various different objectives with, as they attack us. Next is infusing zero trust and post-quantum readiness. Zero trust is a modern way of doing security that shifts defenses from just having a firewall, just having a VPN, or just having a password to more complexity, so that you're using things like multi-factor authentication. You're checking if your device is actually part of the state of Maryland's network. So those items are critically important. And then with post-quantum, we all know that various nation states are stealing now to crack later. With post-quantum, we'll be able to better protect our data even in that eventuality. And then lastly, outreach and partnership. Critical infrastructure, as I mentioned before, is hugely important for various different reasons, such as the activities we saw in like Venezuela, for example, where electricity went out. I stay up late at night thinking through what could happen here in Maryland. So I'm trying to figure out how best can we partner with our different CI partners to ensure they have the data they need to make sure they are resilient to any cyber attacks themselves. And then lastly is continue to deepen partnerships. I know that partnership is key in cybersecurity, as is normally stated. Cybersecurity is a team sport. We have to actually build that team and maintain that team. So continue to partner across the state, across the local, with industry, and is where possible, with our federal partners as well. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I have one, just real quick. It was one of your early slides. I thought I heard you say something about work with those individuals willing to work with us. And I want to make sure I understood what that meant exactly. Who is within our sphere not willing to work with you?
Certainly. So one of the things that we're working through with Office of Security Management is centralizing all the agencies. I think like 10 years ago or so, there was a centralization effort which was partially successful, where we have some agencies, some organizations who maintain the opinion they have various different degrees of independence. So the first step as far as that, address those who are willing to work with us immediately to get them on board centralized. And then we have the other cohort of organizations that we have to lean into more what's already in law and legislation to get them on board to our services so that, again, we can have that centralized view and visibility across the state.
And just to build on that a little bit, there's the centralization framework that James mentioned, but in Maryland, the bigger an agency you are, the less enterprise you are. So that's a challenge. And so a lot of it does come down to relationship building. I think it's also a question, as we're seeing with the websites now, there are lots of non-enterprise agencies that are sitting on a Maryland.gov domain. And, we don't want them to be sitting on SharePoint because it's not being patched anymore. So it's also a matter, in addition to what's the remit, I think we're also finding, where technology has created some sprawl that we need to get our arms around. So it's a complicated problem.
So doesn't have to be now, obviously, but I'd like to pursue this a little further. I'd like to understand who is not willing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, got a couple questions, but I'll kind of go back to where you were to start. So about 10 years ago, I put a bill in to give that power, where basically the idea was you as the CISO for the state, you're the person that makes a decision if there's a cyber attack and what to do. And the pushback was from agencies that had federal computers, federal systems have to work with, for instance, Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Human Resources, where their argument was we have computers that are federally, they're federal systems also, and there was just arguments they couldn't touch it. So my question is, have we made any improvements making you, the CISO, to be able to call the shots for every agency in this state? Because, let's say something does happen. Somebody hits an email, clicks on something they shouldn't, and it's spreading through the state. Who has the ultimate, decision? I guess it would, of course, be the governor to say shut something down. But does it come back to this agency?
So I'll say I've been here since May, and the short answer is yes, it's me. The state CISO does have that power, it's clear in law, and it was executed clearly multiple times over this past summer due to a handful of cyber incidents.
Okay. You had talked about working with other agencies and stuff, and I know the counties and the local municipalities, they're doing their best to catch up, but, IT is expensive. And updating systems, as you said, SharePoint is not being updated. I think Microsoft 10, they're no longer doing patch 4. And I know there are government computers out there that are running Microsoft 10 and others. Do you work with them to bring them in line or to help them maybe with guidance? Like, for instance, the one I know about is like Cyber 9 line with the National Guard. Should there be an attack, how they can come in and assist? Are you working with those, with the counties and the municipalities on that?
Yes, we have been working with all 23 plus Baltimore City. And a good example of that is we actually had them in with us developing a new policy suite for IT and cybersecurity to the point that we're redlining comments and working with us directly. We also have the Maryland Local Cybersecurity Collaborative, which brings together the CISOs from the different counties to engage with us directly. Now, as far as resources and such, we do work with them to figure out how can they leverage the SLGCP to get additional funds. And one of the items I've been talking to Secretary Savage about since I arrived here is like, how do we extend the resources and capabilities and technology we have with OSM down to the locals, assuming they're willing to work with us, of course. Understand there's a home rule concept some agency locals like to work with. But how do we extend our capability to support them if they're willing to leverage what we're using? So those are some of the initiatives that we're working on. But the short of it is, yes, we do work closely with the locals.
Mr. Chairman, a couple more if you don't mind. And this was for the Madam Secretary. You had talked about efficiencies with procurement, like the Microsoft,
Yeah.
you had 13 contracts, we're taking it down to 1, which I guarantee has got to be a huge savings
Yes.
for the number of
Yes.
GFEs that are assigned to it. And I know Governor Moore, I think it was last year, the year before, had put in like, I think 4 pillars of where he thinks he can do savings, or we as a state could do savings with, it was real estate, fleet vehicles, and one of them was IT.
Yeah.
Have we hit any metrics with that, with any of this that you're doing?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's a couple different categories. We have, as you mentioned, a couple of those initiatives internal to do it. I can pull the latest, greatest number, but I think we've saved somewhere around 15, 16 million just internal to do it by doing some of this contract consolidation. Because it's not just the software, to your point, it's also the contractors. I mean, some of the contractors administering, and James and I see this a lot with cybersecurity software, and I know you're really familiar with it, where you see a Splunk administrator that we can utilize Sentinel. I mean, that administrator could be a couple $100,000. Yep. So we've done that internal to do it, and we've been able to just reinvest that into our budget. Do It is also part of the governor's modernization initiative. So Secretary Chaudhry has been owning really the fleet management effort. We've seen some savings, notably around Salesforce, which is one that our external consultants have been supporting us on to do the. Salesforce is a little trickier to consolidate just because the way it's architected, as well as around laptops. So there have been some savings as part of that effort as well.
What about, and the other one I've been looking at is servers. I was actually touring an agency, I think it was in the spring, who still had a on-site server. And I just kind of questioned, why do we still have that? They said, well, we haven't upgraded yet.
Yeah.
Are we in the process of trying to move everything to cloud via Azure or AWS?
It's like you were in our office last week. And
As you said, this is what I do for a living. So.
Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, one of the challenge, I would say the biggest challenge that we have in the state is that we have so many legacy applications that were built before, so the advent of COTS, of, commercial off-the-shelf products. And so over the past 2 years, DO-IT has been trying, both from a cyber angle and, frankly, from a application modernization effort, trying to get our arms around, like, what is that universe of custom applications that are sitting out there on servers, and can we move them, to a COTS product? So that's sort of one of these efforts. And, when I spoke earlier about, like, EHR systems and things like that, that's one of those things. We're trying to find more of those, like, workhorse products where we can consolidate those things. But, it's going to take some time. I mean, we're talking about probably tens of thousands of applications. So one of Marcy's efforts is no new bad. Let's not build anything custom on new servers, and really focus on, a product that, frankly, someone else is going to maintain. But then James, and Marcy also collaborate on what do we do, about the patching and maintenance of those applications. I didn't mention this on the slide, but our infrastructure office, where Network Maryland and Maryland First are, we are also launching a disaster recovery as a service, both, to ensure that if there are those critical applications that are on a server, if that server goes offline, we can recover really quickly. But we also, want to make sure that we're doing all of that sort of maintenance and preparedness. So it is a massive challenge.
And the last one, Mr. Chair, it's more of a statement, and I know your age, it's tough. I mean, IT procurement is very hard, with how quickly technology moves. And I know you've heard from the industries out there, with different tools, systems, integrators, everything. It's just sometimes it's tough dealing with your office on some of this stuff, and I just ask that you please try to keep working with them. Because as you said, he said, using Cloudflare, I mean, there's a lot of great tools out there to use. And I think that, unfortunately, part of the problem we have here is the philosophical change of administrations.
Yeah.
And it's not like building a building where that building will stand for 100 years. It was built, the previous administration, we're good. It's, you buy a new technology, a new software, a new administration comes in, they want to change it. And it's costly to the state. But I think it's frustrating for some of these vendors that are trying to help with this, that you just please keep communicating with them and keep the door open to discuss it, because
if I could,
and that's
just
so.
2 quick comments on that. We had it had its first vendor day last fall. That was tremendously successful, so much so that we're having another one next month. Because we definitely hear that. And, some of the feedback we also got is, let's make sure that primes and subs are identified so they can find each other and work together. The other thing, Secretary Chaudhry and I are working closely on what is the IT portion, procurement, and can we separate that out? It's a much longer conversation, but one of my big concerns is that agencies put in, a ticket for IT procurement, and it's nowhere close to the solution that they need. Going back to what Marcy was saying, I'm not trying to solve I'm buying a permanent system versus I'm trying to reduce wait times. It's like a problem solution mismatch. So we're also thinking about how do we bring that solutioning team in-house, and we'll probably be looking for pin requests to support that.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Savage and team. We appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Yeah. We'll have more conversations, I'm sure. Okay, we are going